What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Happy Monday, everyone. Hopefully everybody is rested enough, didn't overeat too much yesterday. I was borderline, I'm not going to lie. Some of you might be feeling a little under the weather, a little case of the Vegas flu. It's going to happen. But it was a somewhat entertaining game, I would say. I'll give some thoughts at the end of the show. We're mostly going to be talking realignment today. We'll be talking some hoops as well. Much needed win for CSU on Saturday night. That's off of the heels of a big women's win over Wyoming. Sellout crowd. Love to see it. I know they did some promotions, but it just kind of cracked me up. And I understand it's tough for Wyoming fans to get to the AA in the winter. But they were just going crazy about the fact that they had like 5,000 fans for the men's game. And then the Rams come back and upstage them with a sellout. You love to see that. On the women's side, big win for Ryan Williams and co. Always great to see them take advantage of that type of atmosphere. Like I said, we will get into hoops. I'll talk Super Bowl. Obviously, awesome to see the CSU guys get a ring. Really happy for Torrey Horton. Really happy for our guy Coobs, and obviously Benton and Rick Dennison are also CSU graduates, which is pretty neat to see that many former Rams, get a win on the biggest stage of all. I'm going to start with a little homage to the Dan Patrick Show, the GOAT, in my opinion. Best and worst of the weekend. If you want to comment yours in the Toyota chat, I'd love to see it. But best, border war sellout for the women's team, followed by a big-time win for the men's team on the Fight Like a Ram event. One of the best things that CSU does, honoring cancer patients. Really a humbling experience. And then the worst, I would say, Super Bowl commercials. They used to be really fun. They're not. Every other commercial was for AI. And I felt like that scene in The Office where they're trying to interview replacements for Dwight after he shoots the gun. And Gabe flips that on Andy and he's like, "Shut up about the sun. Shut up about the sun." That's how I felt about AI watching the Super Bowl commercials. It was a bit much. But I again, we'll give some takeaways in the game. Could be the last game this week against Air Force in basketball, certainly in Clune. I wouldn't be shocked if they came to Moby every now and then. Don't see a ton of incentive in going to the Springs just because of the metrics and stuff. There's just not a whole lot to be gained about it other than you can technically play a true road game without it having to be very hostile. Half the time it ends up being a borderline home game for CSU with all the Ram fans in the spring showing up. Need to take advantage of that. We'll talk about the upcoming schedule when we get into hoops. We did have big realignment news with North Dakota State joining the Mountain West, the FCS powerhouse, after winning 10 national championships in 15 years. Is jumping up to the FBS. They'll be playing in the Mountain West as a football-only member. Important distinction, but starting this year, I think this is a move that's fun for college football. I think there's valid reason for skepticism in terms of how much of a needle mover this truly is. But I think just on a fundamental level of what's fun for the college football fan experience, what's going to be fun to watch, I do think this is a nice move for the Mountain West. I think, honestly, outside of the initial move, with CSU and all those Mountain West schools that are going to the Pac-12, I would say this has been the most exciting, most fun move that either of the leagues have made since the Gonzaga edition on the Pac-12 side, which I felt like really was an awesome win for the Pac-12. Texas State, you understand the logic of it, but I just don't think it's that enticing. And I feel very similarly with the Mountain West and some of the moves they made. UC Davis as a non-football member, Northern Illinois. I saw some people trying to sell me on UNI, including some UNLV folks on Twitter over the weekend. And I roll my eyes, trying to claim you get the Chicago market because of Northern Illinois is like claiming you'd get Denver with Air Force, which is just not true. But the options are slim for both leagues. And that's the stark reality of this situation. And I think if you're the Mountain West going out and getting a program that has incredible community support, I mean, the Fargo Dome is really cool. Their fans really show out in a major way, and they're going to be stoked about this situation. I think it's a nice no-brainer move for the Mountain West, especially considering North Dakota State is willing to spend reportedly $12 million to buy their way into the conference. That's huge in all of this. I think we are now one step closer to some settlement, with the lawsuits between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. I've said all along, those Pac-12 schools aren't going to get away scot-free. They also aren't going to pay what the league initially intended. You probably meet somewhere in the middle, but you need that money if you're the Mountain West that you promised to schools like Air Force and UNLV to keep them around. Otherwise, they could potentially come back into play for the Pac-12 later on. But as is, I think this is a sensible move for both sides. I do understand. I understand that some people will have the knee-jerk reaction of why go from being an FCS powerhouse, from basically running things at the FCS level, to potentially being in a situation where you're matched up in the Idaho Potato Bowl against a school from the MAC. That's from a big time atmosphere, from a big time game standpoint, probably a step down. But I also feel like North Dakota State has proven for a long time that they're capable of competing at this level. And I honestly wonder if it was becoming more challenging for a program like North Dakota State to get those bye games on the books, because if you're an FBS program, and CSU experienced this ironically at the beginning of the dynasty for North Dakota State when they came in and beat CSU in Hughes, who was coming off of a big time Rocky Mountain Showdown win over CU in the Jim McElwain debut. You follow it up with a game where you just get dominated, punched in the face by North Dakota State at home. They're one of those programs, and have been for a long time, where you really ask yourself as a fan base, why would we ever schedule this team? What's the point of it? Everybody knows that they're a competitive program, and they're probably going to come in and at the very least give you a run for your money, if not beat you. I mean, they were right there going punch for punch with schools like Iowa and Minnesota. But if you are those programs, like, what do we get out of playing this game? We're going to pay you to come into our stadium and beat us. And even though if you're a college football diehard, that's not truly an embarrassing loss, because North Dakota State has been so solid for so many years. But on the surface, it's a loss to an FCS team. And if you beat them, good job. You did what you were supposed to do. You get no credit for beating them. You can potentially get mocked for losing to them, at least now, if you are some of those programs like in Iowa, like in Minnesota. If we're going to pay you $1 million or whatever to come into our building and play us, if we do happen to fall against you, at least now you're an FBS opponent, and it doesn't kill you the same way. From an optics standpoint, I mean, all of that's just about perception and ego, right? It's on the surface a loss either way. If they're an FBS or an FCS team, it doesn't truly matter. Like, they all count the same. But from a perception standpoint, I do think there's something to be said about that. I also feel like if you're North Dakota State, you've been so dominant over the last, close to 2 decades. Again, 10 national championships in 15 years, incredible success within their league, really dominant in the playoffs. Even in some of those years they didn't win, they were right there knocking on the door for another title. At some point, you probably look around and ask yourself, have we accomplished all that we can here? And is this still going to be a big draw if, we just dominate everyone year after year? Winning is a lot more fun than losing. Don't get me wrong. If you really put a knife to my back, obviously I'd rather have CSU be an FBS team. But based on how rough things have been over the last 15 years, would it have been more fun to win 10 national championships in 15 years? Probably. But people will always have the caveat of, they're really great, but they're an FCS team. They're really good for an FCS team, but they're an FCS team. You always have that little qualifier at the end. And if you're a program like North Dakota State, and you look at teams in the MAC and even the Mountain West, I think if they had been in the Mountain West over the last decade, would they have won the league at some point? Likely. I mean, that's a meat and potatoes program, incredibly well coached. They run the ball down your throat. They're creative with some of the stuff they do schematically. You're not going to get NFL quarterbacks there very frequently, although I guess Trey Lance technically played there. Carson Wentz too, so maybe that's just not a good take. I take that one back. But I don't think you're going to get, a 5-star pocket passing quarterback who's got options at big time programs with consistency. If you're a team like that, and I think they've done a good job of leaning into some of the multi fullback sets and all kinds of wonky stuff. They're a really fun watch, and I think it'll be cool to see them play Air Force and Wyoming. I think those could potentially be really intriguing matchups year to year. And if I'm New Mexico, if I'm UNLV, while again, I think this move makes sense and you probably need it just again from a financial standpoint of getting that $12 million is really big for the conference. You're probably thinking to yourself, great, we're feeling really good about our position at the top of the league moving forward. And now you throw a team like North Dakota State in the mix. They're not eligible to win the league next year, or the first 2 years. Technically, they're not eligible for the playoff. They can technically make a bowl if there's not enough bowl eligible teams. That's a little wrinkle in all of that. They could possibly play for a bowl, but obviously if all those spots get filled, you're not eligible in your first 2 years as you transition from the FCS to the FBS. So that could, potentially be a landmine loss for you if you are a league like the Mountain West, who's obviously going to be competing against the American and the Pac-12 for playoff inclusion. That could potentially, although the move I think is a good one, come back to backfire a little bit if you're, for instance, in a situation where you have a team like North Dakota State go on a great run and they, maybe prevent a double-digit UNLV or New Mexico from making the playoff because they beat them, and then you don't get a spot in the big dance. That could sting. If you're the Pac-12, you're hoping that regardless of what those schools do, that you'll have, better positioning. And I think more times than not, that will be the case. But this is a fun move, I think, for the Mountain West. I think it's a fun move for college football as a whole. And I think it's one that makes sense. I don't think this is a situation where they're going to be dominant at quite the same rate, but I mean, you never know. James Madison certainly has not skipped a beat since jumping from the FCS to the FBS, and North Dakota State used to mop the floor with them. But I think it's a move that's going to be fun for football fans of the group of six. There's a lot of people these days that are kind of snobs and pretend like the Big Ten and the SEC, they're the only thing that matter. They're the only thing that exists. I always, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but not really. Those people, in my opinion, don't truly love college football. But I do think that this is a move that's going to be pretty fun, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. And I'm also, if I'm being 100% real, somewhat thankful that this move is happening after CSU is leaving, because that's just not a program you want to have to deal with on a year-to-year basis. They're tough. The Montana schools, the Dakota schools, they'll give you a run for your money. I will say, and we'll have to continue this note after the break probably, but you see a lot of people throw out, well, they should also bring over South Dakota State. They should also bring over both Montana schools. And I just don't think that's very realistic. One, I also don't think it makes a ton of sense because you're adding more mouths to feed without bringing in markets that are going to help you make a substantial jump in your revenue from these TV networks, and that's in large part what was a big part of the initial downfall of the original WAC, back in the 90s. And it was not too dissimilar in a sense that you had a lot of instability within multiple leagues. The Southwestern Athletic Conference kind of falls apart. Some of those Texas schools obviously join the Big 8, becomes the Big 12. The WAC ends up scooping up some of those programs, Rice and some of those types of schools. And they get to 16 teams, but it just proved to be too many mouths to feed without enough of the pie to go around, on top of creating some scheduling nuisances. I do think there was an element of teams like CSU and BYU not feeling like they were getting to play their matchups, against regional rivals who the fans cared about. And instead, again, we're getting games against Tulsa and those types of teams. And that's why, the original founding members of the Mountain West, BYU and CSU and Utah and Air Force and Wyoming and Who am I missing? I think that's it. And then they ended up inviting New Mexico and San Diego State and UNLV, obviously. They ended up forming the Mountain West because of that. And still 30 years later, we have people throwing out the exact same type of suggestions. And if you don't learn from your history, you're bound to repeat the same mistakes. And I do think there's a lot of reason, if you're the Mountain West and you're the Pac-12, to be really, really thoughtful about who you add. And again, I think this move makes sense. A team like North Dakota State, especially with them being willing to pay their way into the league. I don't know if Montana would be able to generate that type of dough. You know, you got to pay $5 million to the NCAA on top of, $10 million plus to potentially buy your way into the league. That's a lot of money up front. Can you even generate that? But I'll keep this going after the break. If you're watching live on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, keep the comments rolling in the Toyota chat, and we'll keep this party going. I want to shout out our presenting partners. Of course, I'm talking about Branded Bills. I've mentioned this a bunch, but I've been seeing more and more Branded Bill hats on campus, both, students and also just alumni at games. It's really cool to see. Branded Bills, they have an official partnership with CSU. You can get their hats at the bookstore on campus, but you could also save money, with our official partnership, which is awesome. If you have your own business and you are looking to make your own gear, you're looking to stand apart from the crowd, look no further than Branded Bills. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered. They have some of the best custom headwear around. We have actually used Branded Bills ourselves at DNVR and throughout the ALLCITY network. Have some really cool collabs in the DNVR locker. You should go check those out. Again, they do have a partnership with CSU as part of their on-campus collection, as well as a bunch of other hats. If you like the U of A or Arizona State or some of those schools, they've got all those options as well. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I also would like to shout out our friends over at Raising Cane's. I'm not going to lie, probably should watch what I'm eating post Super Bowl. Got a wedding coming up in the fall, trying to get in shape, which is a battle in your 30s. But sometimes you just need it. Sometimes Cane's just is a craving that you cannot turn down. Make your chicken finger dreams come true at Raising Cane's. Every box combo is filled with craveable, hand-battered, and cooked-to-order chicken fingers. Every crinkle-cut fry comes with grade A premium potatoes. Each thick-sliced Texas toast is lightly brushed with Cane's garlic butter blend and grilled on the griddle to golden brown perfection. And most importantly, the secret recipe Cane's sauce is made in restaurant every single day. Get your box combo today. Make your craveable dreams a reality. Raising Cane's chicken fingers. One love. All right. I see some comments in the Toyota chat. Joe P says, add the two Montanas and South Dakota State, might add competitive to the Mountain West. The problem is it's realignment is so much more complicated than are you able to hang competitively? Because if the question is, are programs like South Dakota State and the Montana schools able to hang competitively? I think without a doubt. Probably better so than some of the teams that might be coming into the league, like UTEP and Northern Illinois. We'll see. I know they've had their moments. They beat Notre Dame a couple years ago. It was kind of fluky, but they've had their moments in defense of that program. I do think that from a competitive standpoint, there's logic in that. This gets so much more political, though, and really what factors into it more than anything in 2026 is, bottom line, how much money are you going to bring to the table? What type of viewership do you add? And then are the TV networks, are they invested enough in your market to split the pie more ways? And that's kind of the downfall with some of those smaller state schools, right? Is they just don't command the same type of audience. And even though they would have no problem hanging competitively, if you are some of these schools that are in the Mountain West, you ask yourself, why are we going to spread this money, which is not, on par with the big leagues already? Why are we going to divvy it up that many more ways for teams who are frankly going to beat us and steal some of our shine, but not give us an opportunity to make more money? And I do think that it's unfortunate that is such a big factor in this. But I mean, I think the best example you can look at is a program like Boise State, right? if the question was just as simple as, are you a competitive and fun addition to our league? Boise State should have been in the Big 12 15 plus years ago. I mean, they were a top 10 team, throttling, big time programs as a member of the WAC, and then they don't skip a beat when they come into the Mountain West. Have been incredibly consistent since, still not on the level that they were, I would say, in, the late 2000, 2008, 2009, 2010, 11, when they've got Kellen Moore there and they're like a top 5 team. They're not quite what they used to be. And I just don't know if you can be as a group of 6 team in the same way, but they're not able to get into the Pac-12 all those years because some of those schools looked down at them academically. And you could also argue that that was part of the Pac-12's downfall, that their own snootiness proved to, end up biting them in the butt in the end. If you were a league like Cal, or if you're a team like Cal, Stanford, you can't probably stop a USC, a UCLA from taking that Big Ten money, but do you maybe wish you had not been so snooty at the schools like Boise State, San Diego State, CSU, potentially? But that is the reality of the situation, is academics are a big factor in this. Perception's a big part in this. Market share and bottom line are the biggest factors. But it's not just as simple as, are you good enough to, play in this league? If it were fans making the decisions when it comes to realignment, I think a lot of it would come down to that. It would be much more clear cut. So much of college sports would be simplified if this was not through the lens of what can make the pockets deeper for the TV execs and the big wig, donors. But this is just where we're at in college sports today. And again, I think North Dakota State is kind of a unique position in which they've accomplished basically everything they could at the FCS level. They happen to have enough community support and money to put on the table to buy their way into the FBS. And they're betting on themselves, being able to compete at a high level. And I do think you also got to remember that I think the conversation has changed with some of these programs. I think if they had the money, the Montanas would be interested in the FBS. I don't know if they can afford to do it. I don't want to speak for them just based on what I've gathered. I don't think they would have, $5 million to pay the NCAA fee, but then again, an additional reported $12 million just to buy your way into the conference. That's a lot of money for some of these small schools. That's not a simple solution, for a lot of these programs. I think it's kind of the perfect timing for a team like North Dakota State, who's proven everything they can at the FCS, but now you also technically do have a viable path to the playoff, theoretically, right? If you're the Pac-12, obviously you're hoping to not get upshined by leagues like the Mountain West and the American, at least with consistency, or this move will have probably been a failure. We'll have to see how it all plays out over the next decade plus. But if you're in North Dakota State, you can talk yourself into, well, I mean, if we went 11-1, we should be able to compete at a high level. It'll be interesting to see what schools are willing to schedule them in the non-conference slate. But you could talk yourself into, why couldn't we be a Boise State where we make the playoff and maybe even win a game? I mean, winning a game at the FBS, the amount of money you would make from that alone. And again, this is just speculation on my part. I don't have the numbers in front of me, being fair. But I would imagine an FBS, playoff, even appearance, but a win especially, probably making a whole lot more money off of that than you do even winning a national championship at the FCS level. It's just the reality of the situation. There's just so much more money to be made at the FBS level. You can compete. You have a kind of the perfect storm here with the Mountain West being in a position where they have to be more flexible and creative. I think there's been interest in the Mountain West from North Dakota State side for a while. I do think back in the day, probably some of these schools that are going to the Pac-12, they probably ask themselves again, like, what exactly do we gain by adding you? You don't have as big of a market. You're not going to make us more money, but you might potentially beat us and upstage us. And I think there's, again, an argument from the fan side of, well, we should just try and create the most entertaining product possible. But there's just so many politics that come into play with all this. And I'm really interested to see what happens. CD Stick says, unfortunately, he believes North Dakota State becomes Wyoming within 5 years. They don't have a unique advantage anymore. They are now an isolated G6. It's a tough life. I mean, it could be. it could be that could be the case. We'll have to see. Or this helps them elevate their brand and you rejuvenate your fans' support base, maybe even expand a little bit. It's tough to say with any type of certainty. It's a bet on yourself though, and frankly, that's what a lot of these programs are doing. It's what the departing Mountain West schools are doing by going to the Pac-12. They're looking at the situation and saying, we think that we can be something more. We're willing to take that risk with the way that college football is going. I don't know if there's a whole lot more for us to achieve as is, and we're willing to take that gamble, but it is very much a gamble. I am obviously interested in what happens here. You're now at 10 members if you're the Mountain West. Like I said before, would be arguing in favor of staying lean. I think they've done enough to at least stay afloat. We'll see in the long term how relevant you really are. I think there's still a lot of misconceptions and bad takes about the media deal, in the sense like if you're the Mountain West and you get what you've been getting the last couple of years, that's not a total failure, right? Especially considering the position that you're in. You lost a lot of your big brands, and if you're able to continue to get what you're getting, and we don't know for sure if they are, we know those legacy schools are going to get paid that regardless. And again, that's why you need more money from programs like North Dakota State being willing to spend $12 million to come in. You've got a lot of money that you've promised a lot of these programs. I wonder what you do next if you're the Pac-12 now. Are you more aggressive in pursuing a school like St. Mary's? They obviously don't have a football program. I don't think you would give them a full share like you did with Gonzaga. Would you be willing to give a third of a media rights share to a program like St. Mary's, who's going to compete again? But what do they bring from a market standpoint? Not a ton, but you don't allow the Mountain West to add another competitive basketball program. I do think some of that's a factor. You also add baseball and soccer and some other Olympic sports that you probably need more teams to fill out in the new Pac-12. I think it would be a really fun move. Business-wise, I don't know if it gives you a ton, other than it's just another school you can throw in that late night West Coast TV slot. I do think there's money to be made, especially on the basketball side for the Pac-12, and I think they'll lean into that. I think, again, it was proven when they were willing to give Gonzaga a full share. But I am still keeping an eye on UConn because they're independent at the moment in football. And I know that geographically that seems asinine. I never would have suggested something like this in the mid-2000s. I remember when TCU and Boise State were set to join the Big East, just the mockery that they received from it, because, again, from a geographic standpoint, it just feels insane to think Connecticut could be in the Pac-12. But I do think you need another football brand. And I do think if you're able to parlay that into a situation where you get a scheduling agreement with the Big East, which has been speculated by a bunch of different people, that could be really fun from a basketball standpoint. And it would give you another football team, so you don't have to, do the home and home thing on a yearly basis. I think they're at least a viable option. It gives you another team in the Eastern time zone. From a business standpoint, there could be some value in that. But a lot of that comes down to the TV networks, right? There's some people that have reported that even if Memphis had been interested in joining the Pac-12, it really wouldn't have changed the TV dollars that much. I still would add them, because I think if you add Memphis from a basketball and football standpoint, at that point, no doubt, have you established yourself as the best of the rest. Whether you're Power 4 or whether it becomes P5, all of that is subjective. I've long argued that if you're the ACC, you're probably in a better position than the Big 12. Big 12's certainly a better spot than the Pac-12, but you're closer to the Pac-12 than you are to the SEC and the Big Tens of the world. Like if you're in those leagues and you're huffing and puffing and putting your chest out, I would say there's a little bit of delusion in there. You got to look in the mirror yourselves, especially with how, Texas and OU. But I am very curious to see who strikes next, because this is a big, bold play from the Mountain West. They've done a good job, all things considered, of, again, like just staying in the fight. That's all you can really hope to do. They got dealt a pretty tough situation with half the league, your biggest brands, hitting the road and going to the newly formed Pac-12. But it's going to be interesting to see how this arms race plays out, because it's certainly not the last move. I don't think there's going to be a ton of moves that get made from here out, over the next half decade. But I do think if you're the Pac-12, you certainly need another football school. Maybe you get to 10 at some point on the football side. Other than that, though, I'd stand pat, and I would try and establish your leagues as is, and you see where the cards lie, when the next round of media deals come up, and there's potentially more movement. If you're the Pac-12, you root for instability within the ACC and the Big 12, and you maybe some of those OG schools come back into the play down the line, especially if this league ends up being considered a success, and you're making the playoff on a yearly basis, and you're getting decent enough money, and you're relevant. That who knows what could happen with the Arizona schools or Cal or whoever. Stanford, I still wonder if they would be too snooty to be in a conference with schools like Boise State, but at some point you are going to have to be a little bit more flexible than you were, in past years. You've really just got to do what you can to stay alive, and that's what the Pac-12 and the Mountain West are both doing at the moment. Let me take a quick break real quick. We'll keep this rolling. We've still got a ton to dive into. Might give a few more thoughts on realignment, but we've still got hoops to talk about, give some Super Bowl takeaways. Again, hit that thumbs up if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio only side, you wouldn't mind giving a review. I certainly would appreciate it. Let me shout out these partners real quick. Let me talk to you about Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, whether you are hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you, like the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser as well. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. Really perfect for Colorado living. You have the versatility of being able to get good fuel mileage when you're driving in city, which is a big factor. I mean, I'm on I-25 all the time. It can be stop and go. It can be a real nuisance, but you also have the peace of mind of knowing you're going to be able to handle whatever weather gets thrown your way. Knock on wood, to this point hasn't been the craziest winter, but I'm sure we're gonna pay for it down the line come spring. There are 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra i4 Max hybrid truck. Toyota is an official partner of CSU Athletics. Toyota and they are an official partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. I also want to talk to you about the homies at Game Time. I love that hockey season is back and going full-blown intense right now with the Olympics. It's going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, a break with the NHL. But in a couple weeks, man, we're going to be right back at it, right back in the thick of things. A lot of big-time matchups coming up for the Avs within the division. They start on the road against Utah, but then they've got a big game against Minnesota at home. There's going to be some big matchups with Dallas down the line. There's nothing better than being in Ball Arena, experiencing the energy, when the Avs are really firing. I would argue they are the best at what they do of all the local sports teams. Nuggets are great. They've had some injuries, obviously. Broncos had an awesome season. But there's just nothing like the energy of especially the Stanley Cup playoffs, being in the building for some of those Avs Stars games. It was unreal. And what's great about Game Time, you're going to get the best deals in town. You know that you're getting official tickets. You've got that peace of mind. Also, you're not going to get hit with a million late fees. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, y'all. Just kind of putting a bow on the conference realignment stuff, because I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit in throwing out every hypothetical scenario that we've talked about a million times over the last multiple years. Again, I think everybody knows where they stand on all of this. You either think they should have merged and this was all just a complete waste of time, or you're a defender of the Pac-12 and you understand what they're doing from a perception standpoint. You understand it's kind of a leap of faith. They're trying to be something more during a time when a lot of those big brands have very clearly left, schools like Boise and San Diego State and CSU behind. I will say Sac State has probably got to be fuming at the moment. They've been trying to buy their way into an FBS conference for like the last year, and North Dakota State just swoops in and steals their shine. That's a tough scene. I do imagine somebody will eventually take a bite on them, especially if they're willing to pay $10 million like they reportedly are. Sounds like there's some serious interest on the MAC side. Doesn't sound like the Pac-12 or Mountain West are all that interested in them. I think part of the problem with Sac State is, despite being, you're in the capital of California, obviously it's big market in theory, you just don't have local support. And it puts you in a position where it's San Jose State 2.0. Like you see, even when San Jose State's good, their crowds are just so depressing. Nobody cares about college sports at those schools. And that's just a harsh reality. I mean, Sac State sounds like very similar situation. I mean, it's just not, it's not North Dakota State. It's not Montana. It's not Montana State. You're not adding some incredible atmosphere with big time fan support. Might they be able to compete? Sure. I mean, they've had some nice seasons and recent runs, but I just don't think they do much for you if you're the Pac-12 or the Mountain West. And again, I do think there's a lot of value in staying lean. And I think you've got to be patient, because while all of us want this to be resolved right now, myself included, I'm tired of speculating. I'm sure a lot of you are tired of hearing me speculate. We can only, throw out the hypotheticals so many times. This isn't just a 2026 move. This is an investment in your brand, and a bet that over, a 10-year sample size, this move will be better for you. I credit the Mountain West for getting creative and finding a way to stay afloat. Still intrigued by what the future Pac-12 can be, although I've admitted I think they overplayed their hand a little bit with Memphis and Tulane and those types of schools. I truly believe they thought there'd be more interest there. I think you're going to see a lot of disingenuous takes about their deals are the same because some of the channels are going to be the same. It's not true. Pac-12 will have significantly more games on linear cable, far better exposure, and that was something that was important to them. Do I think there could have been more money on the table had they just gone all in on a streamer, on Apple or Netflix or whoever, Amazon, whoever it may have been? I do think you probably could have gotten like a 15 million per year type range on a streamer who's just willing to go all in on you. But that's a big gamble on it, and being easily accessible is going to be a big factor for the Pac-12, because you've just got to stay in the conversation, stay relevant, have fun games, get people to buy into what you're cooking. And who knows, 5 years, you might look down the line and it's very clear cut that it's a top 5 hoops league and it's very clearly established itself as the best of the rest. And there could be more interest from a Memphis, or again, who knows what'll happen with the Big 12 and the ACC, but one of those schools who is in the OG Pac-12. There's occasional short-term sacrifice. Again, maybe you left a little bit of money on the table, but staying true to your vision is important. And I do think there's a lot of value of learning from the downfall of the OG WAC. And even some of these bigger leagues right now, I wonder if in the next 10 to 15 years, the Big 10 is like 18 schools or whatever it is. I think it's more than that now. The SEC, like, if you just ask yourself, is this actually better for anyone? We'll see. We shall see. Realignment is never ending, though. That is important to remember. CD6 says, I could be talked into Tarleton State in like 5 years. We'll see if they continue to invest. Who knows? I mean, anything is possible. Like, I think it would have seemed kind of crazy that in 2010, if you would have said North Dakota State's in the Mountain West and Boise State's in the Pac-12, both of those would have seemed like crazy scenarios. But this is where we're at, and it's great for content. It's great for drama. A lot of the moves have probably not been great for the general fans of college sports, but I do think, all things considered, with options being slim, both the future of the Pac-12 and Mountain West are intriguing, and you've got brands that you could talk yourself into being relevant and competitive, and we'll see how it all plays out, right? Like, again, I think I'm not going to do the whole, this is why CSU is doing it for the 8 millionth time. If you don't understand it, you just don't, and that's fine. Are there moves that would have made me feel like this was more of a home run right out of the gate? Yes. Were there moves I agreed with wholeheartedly, like adding Gonzaga? Also, yes. I think going and getting Utah State was huge. I mean, imagine had you not been able to pull off Utah State in all of this. Like, you could argue that you should have been more proactive in securing a UNLV or a Memphis or a New Mexico or whatever. But I mean, suddenly that proved to be a pretty big move in all this. And I really am excited from a basketball standpoint. I think the football league I think the parity will be good, and I think it'll be competitive. The question is can you firmly establish yourself as a clear step above the rest, better than the American, better than the Mountain West? I think you have a good chance to, but we shall see. All right, let's talk hoops, because I don't want to put them off to the last 10 minutes like I have a couple of times, because we actually get to talk about a win. Much needed win for the Rams at home on a great night. The Fight Like a Ram cause is probably the best thing that CSU does. I mean, there's great traditions. I love Ag Day. Like, Ag Day is my favorite tradition. But if you're talking about just something being a great use of elevating your community and being there for people in need, like the simple, kind gesture of wearing cancer survivors' names on the back of your jersey in place of your own, and playing for them and playing for your community it's really cool, man. Like, for all of the stuff that's wrong with college sports right now and all the decisions that are rooted in greed and not thinking about, what makes college sports special or unique, which is that element of actually being in your community, more so than pro sports teams even. This is what it's all about. And you hear the players and you hear how emotional Ali is post-game, talking about what it means to these guys to meet these people and hear what they're going through. It's incredibly humbling, and it's a great way to check your perspective, right? Because, man, losing basketball games, it's no fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm somebody who makes a living in talking about sports. I'm not going to be ignorant in that sense and be like, it doesn't matter. But in the big picture sense, when we're talking about, what life or death, I mean, man, there's struggles so much more significant than little things like losing basketball games. Obviously, I want to see the Rams take advantage of this win. Hope they can turn a corner, take advantage of the schedule coming up. But to get this win against San Jose State on this night was really cool. And it was really cool to hear Rashawn Bemba and Jevin Mooney's talk post-game about just what it means to them. I mean, one of the cancer survivors hadn't left their house in multiple months, and they came to this game, and the relationships and the bonds that get established between these people and the players, it's significant. The person that David Roddy represented a couple years ago, they were at Roddy's first NBA game. They were at this game the other night too. Like, a lot of them come back and then support the next generation, and I just think it's a really cool example of CSU using their platform for a really special cause, and what's it's such a win, right? Like, it's a low effort move. Like, it's not like you have to go out of your way to do something that really means a lot. And I love to see it from CSU. So big ups to the players and the staff for continuing this tradition. I hope it never goes away. I hope it's it'd be cool to see it implemented on the football side. Logistically, probably much more challenging to pull off. I understand that. But it's not like there's a shortage of people battling cancer out there. Obviously, I think everybody knows somebody who's been impacted by it, and it's just a really cool cause. So I wanted to add that before we talked about, the X's and O's and what went well and what didn't, just on a big picture sense. It's such a cool move that CSU continues to do this, and every year it makes me emotional. Like, I'm trying not to get choked up even just like thinking about it. It's just a really cool thing that the Rams do. And it was obviously great to see the Rams respond and get a dub. San Jose State sucks. I get it. Quick aside, man, does Tim Miles deserve better than San Jose State? I know there are some people that are still bitter about all of that. He is a great example of the grass not always being greener out there, even when the cash was underappreciated at Nebraska. And now, unfortunately, is in a purgatory situation where it's been passed over a couple of times. I really thought he was going to land the New Mexico gig when they ultimately went with Richard Pitino. He thought he was going to land the New Mexico gig too, and Pitino kind of came in late and swooped it. But he is a phenomenal coach, and they remain competitive despite not having any depth and not having any money or support. He's a really good basketball coach. And I agree with what Ali said post-game, that CSU basketball would not be what it is today without Tim Miles. Because while Nico came in and truly elevated this program, Tim was who gave that proof of concept. Tim was who showed, if you get the right guys in here, if you do commit to hoops and not just solely be a football school, we can go to the NCAA tournament. You know, we can compete at the top of what was a really good Mountain West League back then. I mean, you still had BYU back then. It was a lot of fun. And I know that some people will always be a little bit salty about him leaving CSU for Nebraska. I remember in the moment, it was heartbreaking. That was like, I had just really gotten into CSU hoops in a way, like wholeheartedly for the first time, because their games just weren't on TV very much growing up when I was a kid. You'd get, like, if they played CU, that'd be on Fox Sports Net or Root or whatever it was called at the time. It's had 15 different names. You'd get like Wyoming and those types of games on, you know, again, like the regional sports network. But up until, you know, like the implementation of the Mountain Network, and then they when they got the TV deal with CBS Sports Network, like there just wasn't a ton of access to watch CSU hoops growing up on TV. You could listen on the radio. But I really got into them, you know, in high school, that 2010, 2011 range. Then obviously they continued it with Larry, at least at the beginning, fizzled out very quickly under him, and kind of bottomed out again. But again, without Tim Miles, like I just think needing to see that it was possible is what led us to the path that we're on now, where we're striving for so much more. This season has certainly been a disappointment. You would have expected them to be more competitive in league play, but there have been moments. I mean, you got the home win over CU. We're highly competitive in the non-conference slate, aside from the slip up against DU, which you still look back on and just shake your head. I mean, they beat North Dakota in their own building the other night, and they're a good program. So I mean, it's not like that DU team is atrocious. Like I think even if the metrics don't agree with me, I think they are a better team than the UC Riverside team that the Rams lost to 2 years ago. But it's been tough in league play, and obviously they were in a really rough stretch, and you just needed a win. And I know that San Jose State is not a team that is going to be who, you know, it's not a win you're going to be bragging about or anything like that. And I do think you have to factor that in. Your last 2 wins have been Air Force and San Jose State, when you've matched up against teams that you're at least in theory on par with, or even trying to punch up a little bit. That the results have not been there. But maybe you can go on a run here over the second half of the league slate. You know, I don't think we're going to see this team do what they did last year and win like 15 straight games and run straight through the Mountain West tournament and then make the NCAA tournament. Crazier things have happened in sports, and especially college sports. So I wouldn't say it's impossible. I just think if you're going to be holding your breath for that, might be a tough proposition. But get to 20 wins. Get to 20 wins. You're 13-10 right now. You've got 8 regular season games remaining. You've got a fairly favorable stretch of schedule. Can you get to 20? You know, can you go 6-2 here, and then win a couple of games in Vegas? I don't think you're going to win it all, but could you make the semifinals even? I think if you ended on a high note and made a little bit of a run, it would at least give you some optimism and excitement, you know, for next year. And then I do hope to see the Rams compete at a higher level next season, because again, I do think the bar has been raised for CSU. We're not going to just be accepting of, you know, if you have multiple seasons of this, then you start having tough conversations. But I do think that Ali is a really brilliant young basketball mind. I think he's a phenomenal recruiter. I've seen what he's done from a player development standpoint up close and personal as Nico's right-hand man. And I really think he's going to figure it out. I do. I haven't been stoked with the results this year because I'm a CSU guy. I want to see the team succeed, but I think we've got to be realistic too, and give some grace to a first-year head coach who has a lot of reason to believe in him. Again, tremendous recruiter. He's done great things with guard development over the years. I mean, players like Zay, they don't make the same type of leap. Neek as well. They would tell you firsthand just how big of an impact that Ali Farokhmanesh had on them and how much work he put in with those guys behind the scene. I know that he grinds. I know this team is incredibly well prepared, and that's why I believe that over time, they're going to figure it out, and they're going to be right back in the mix of, hanging at the top of the league and pushing for NCAA tournaments. This season's been a bit of a downfall, but you have a chance to end on a high note. This upcoming stretch of the schedule is not too crazy. You got Air Force in the Springs. Wyoming has been competitive, especially at home. They gave Utah State everything they could handle this past weekend, but that's a winnable game, especially at home. Then you go on the road against UNLV, who you never know what you're going to get out of them. I mean, they just beat GCU, who's another team that, like, GCU, Nevada, Boise, CSU to an extent, on their best nights, they look pretty dang good. And then they've just got these really confusing performances where they don't even look remotely like the same team, like with what we saw from CSU in Laramie. Like, you watch the Rams against the Buffs, you watch the Rams against the Pokes in Laramie, they look like two completely different basketball teams. But I do think that there are subtle signs that this team is trending at least the right direction. Now, again, keep your expectations relative. That's based on what we've seen from them in league play. But I do think that the offensive execution is better. I think they're getting downhill with more consistency. I thought there was an emphasis both in the Wyoming game, but especially in the San Jose State game, to attack more in transition. I think they've maybe been a little complacent about operating within the half court at times. And if you have those opportunities to run on a team and get a transition bucket or get to the free throw line, you had 20 free throw attempts for the first time since your win against Air Force. How much I talked about that in recent shows of just putting more pressure on the defense. And some of that is being able to withstand the pressure that the defense is putting on you. CSU's had turnover issues. They've struggled at times with on-ball pressure. They've done a little bit better these past couple of games. You only had 10 turnovers, I think, against San Jose State. You had 8 in that Wyoming game, but that was after having a combined 33 against San Diego State and Utah State. So they've done a good job of creating good looks. Admittedly, the three-point shooting has fallen off of a cliff. That's hard to understand. But I will say, this isn't the first time I've talked about this either. When you look at the numbers with this program over the last 6-7 years, I feel like they've been fairly streaky. Like, the numbers always even out and they end up being a good three-point shooting team, sometimes even a great team. Last year, I thought they were a little bit more consistent, but I feel like this isn't really something new for CSU, even like during, some of those Thistlewood years where they'd be awesome for 2.5 weeks and then they couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat for 2 weeks. And over the course of the season, the numbers end up being respectable. But I do think they've been streaky, and maybe that's just college basketball as a whole. You're not going to be the Warriors out there. But it's not as if they're getting bad looks. And again, I like that even though the three-point shots weren't falling for basically anybody other than Pasquarelli, and it was a great sign to see him hit 3 threes in this one, I don't think that Rechsteiner's taking bad shots. I don't think Jorgensen's taking bad shots. A lot of those looks, especially in some of these home games, probably going to fall with more consistency if you keep taking them. But you do that on top of playing inside out, which I think they've done better of, instead of just working the ball around the perimeter. No, you take the 3. No, you take the 3. I think they're trying to play inside out with more consistency. And I think it's producing a lot of positive results. First of all, guys like Bemba are really tough to handle in the post. His consistency, his touch in the paint and off the glass, I think has been huge for this team. He and Jev just bring a different level of physicality. They can withstand the pressure better than some of the other guys on the team. Both those guys, despite coming off the bench, I felt like were the reason the Rams won this game, combined for 26 points on 9 of 17 from the floor, 17 rebounds between the two of them. Jev also had 5 assists, which led the team. Look, I would start him personally, but a lot like what Ali said post-game, it matters more who's closing the game than who starts it. Like, I think there's some vanity elements and everybody wanting to be a starter. You get your name called out. You want to start. And I want guys that have the competitive drive to want to be starters. I do like, though, that he can come in and initiate some offense for you, especially if the shots aren't falling. Can be a good change of pace. I'm glad they put Booth in the lineup. I just think they have to prioritize his development, because if the Rams are going to be the type of team we want them to be next year, I think him taking a big leap would be a big part of that. He flashes, he'll get big time blocks. He'll throw down some dunks. He'll also have some turnovers that leave you, scratching your head at times, drives into traffic without much of a plan. Needs to get in the gym and work on his post play. He's got to be more consistent down there, but his athleticism is through the roof, and he has an opportunity to be an NBA caliber type guy if everything comes together. I liked this tweak of the lineup, and I'm intrigued to see if they stick with it moving forward, especially if you continue to get the type of bench play you're getting from guys like Mooney's and Bemba, and if you could just get a little bit more offensive consistency out of Recksteiner and Jorgensen and these other guys, you're going to be right there in the games, especially with the defense that CSU's playing, because they've made a pretty nice leap on the defensive side from the beginning of league play to now. I think JoJo McIver, I thought that was his best game. There's a lid on the bucket for him offensively still, but he's looking more confident with the ball in his hand. He's making good decisions, making good reads. He's not getting overwhelmed with pressure in the same way. And defensively, I mean, they had him on Kobe Garland. He's picking him up full court. That's their best player. Trusted him enough to be out on the floor for the last 5 minutes, close that game out. And that Ali actually pointed out he closed out the Va Tech game in November too. So it's not the first time we've seen the staff have faith in him, but I thought this was his best game as a CSU Ram. Was really active on the glass. Thought he was great at staying in Garland's grill without picking up fouls, which was an issue for him early on in his career. And as was the case for Zay and Roddy, early on in their careers. It's hard to defend at a high level when you're young. It's also challenging when you have to deal with the intricacies of trying to figure out Mountain West officiating night to night. There were some really atrocious calls both ways. It was on brand. We'll just say that. I'm not going to rant and ramble for this. We all get it, right? Like college basketball officiating just is what it is at this point. But I thought this was an encouraging showing on both ends of the floor, albeit against a really bad team. And you hope to see the Rams build off of it. Before we get out of here, I do have a quick Mountain West power ranking we can just kind of fly through. If you got any thoughts, go ahead and tweet us at DNVR Rams. Air Force, San Jose State at the bottom. That's easy. I think 10 through 6 really fluctuates on the day. You could argue that CSU, based on their season, should be there. I have them a little higher. I have Fresno at 10, although I do think that they've been much more competitive. And I did give UNLV the bump to 9 for beating GCU. They've got a couple of decent wins, but in my heart, I really wanted to have those flipped, if I'm being real. I've got CSU at 8, Wyoming at 7. Kind of depends on the day, but I think Wyoming, based on their last week, and certainly given the head-to-head result, they deserve to be just a notch above the 3 schools below them. 6 through 3, a lot like what I would say about 11 through 8, kind of depends on the day of the week. But I've got Boise at 6. Probably could have given them a bump to 5 after the big win over New Mexico. Their inconsistency drives me crazy, though. The top 4, even with New Mexico losing to Boise recently, this was just me sticking to my gut on what I believe the best teams are. I think that Nevada's 4, New Mexico's 3. Kind of depends on the day with those 2 teams. San Diego State and Utah State, I think, are a clear cut above everyone else. I think Utah State does deserve the top spot. Knife to my back. I think San Diego State's a better team right now, but I do think Utah State, from a resume standpoint, deserves that top spot based on what they have shown of late. It's my top 12. We'll post the graphic on social media. Surely everyone will be in agreement that this was a really rational process, and there's nuance to the conversation, right? We can get that on social media. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about the Super Bowl. This is obviously a CSU podcast. I know, this isn't necessarily what you guys came here for. Really could call it the Justin Michael show, for being real. I mean, it's me rambling most days. We are going to overtime, though, so the conversation continues at thednvr.com. If you're watching... Admittedly, kind of a snoozer of a Super Bowl. I will say, if you're an appreciator of great defense, which I am, I kind of hate when it's not in shootout and everyone's like, this game was just ass. It wasn't ass. It also was not electric. being fair. Seattle moved the ball with consistency. New England, got to credit their defense for hanging around. I did talk myself into after they scored the touchdown of, oh man, is this going to, they kind of hung around against Denver after not doing anything and they stole it. But I really credit Seattle for the way they stuck to the run game. Kenneth Walker, obviously the best performance from a running back since TD. Felt very late 90s Broncos, which makes sense with it being Kubiak as the OC and Dennison and John Benton on that staff. I mean, they really leaned into that old school approach. And as somebody who grew up, adoring that brand of football, I kind of brought a tear to my eye. Also reinforces my take that it's insane Mike Shanahan is not in the NFL Hall of Fame. First of all, he won back-to-back Super Bowls. That enough should get him in. But look at his impact on today's game, his coaching tree, and the reach that it has across the league. It's insane. From McVay and obviously his Shanahan and Kubiak, like it's just absurd to see all these guys, what they've been able to go on and accomplish. His impact on the game is undeniable. Sending love my way to the listeners of the show who are Patriots fans. I'm obviously biased as a Broncos fan. I think Vrabel's an incredible coach. I think he will get the O-line sorted out. But as a biased Broncos fan, seeing McDaniels kind of get it handed to him really in back-to-back games, never going to be upset about that, but mostly just stoked for the CSU guys. Shout out Torrey Horton, shout out Clint Kubiak. I just love seeing that. And the Sam Darnold storyline, the redemption arc is pretty dang neat. All right, here's 15 minutes of me ranting about politics in the Super Bowl. Just kidding. Not gonna even touch that. My opinion with the Super Bowl halftime show is the exact same every year, where it's basically like, oh, that's neat. That's not who I listen to every day. But you want to know what? If you're not into it, you can just mute it. You can go eat some snacks. You can get some fresh air. If you're not into it, you don't have to watch it. And for me, nobody's ever going to touch Prince playing in the rain. But I thought Bad Bunny was a vibe. I obviously don't speak Spanish, so I didn't know what he was saying. But I bobbed along, danced out of rhythm like white folk tend to do. And I enjoyed it. Nothing's ever going to touch Prince for me. But I thought it was good. I thought the pregame stuff with Green Day was good, and Brandy Carlisle and Charlie Puth, I think. I thought everybody was solid. That's my very boring take for you. And again, if you're not into it, then just don't watch. Don't watch. That's simple. I'm not into Kid Rock, so couldn't pay me to turn that on. But if you're into that, good for you. Watch it. Nobody else cares. And same deal with the Super Bowl halftime. Shout out Nick Clifford, had a 30-piece for the Kings, averaging 20 points a game over his last 3. Shout out my awesome friend Abby Parr, CSU alum, the most talented photographer I've ever had the pleasure of working with. One of the most talented individuals. She is killing it at the Olympics. Go check out her stuff on social, Abby Parr. She is incredible. Again, CSU alum. And I thank you to everybody for the Pizza Rex. We'll be putting together some NoCo pizza tier rankings. Maybe I'll break it down even into different cities. We'll have some fun with that over the offseason, but it was cool to see how much traction that ended up gaining on social. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back on Friday. Hit that like. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.